There is a quiet room inside the architecture of every human interaction. Most people walk through it blindly, speaking into the air, tossing words like loose stones into a dark well, hoping something will echo back. They believe that influence is a volume game. They believe that if they speak louder, argue faster, or package their thoughts with enough emotional force, the world will bend to accommodate them. But the world does not bend to volume. The world bends to structure. Consider for a moment the way a heavy door moves. You do not push it at the hinges. You push it at the edge, where the leverage is highest, where the physical laws of the universe do a massive amount of work on your behalf. Human compliance, human attention, and human obedience follow that exact same law of leverage. When you speak without understanding the hidden architecture of command, you are pushing against the hinges. You exhaust yourself. You spend your finite psychological energy attempting to force open doors that are designed to resist crude pressure. True command is never loud. It does not demand attention through spectacle, nor does it posture with artificial authority. True command operates on a frequency so steady, so calibrated to the baseline mechanics of human psychology, that listeners do not feel managed, they feel compelled. They feel as though the thought they just received was their own creation. That is the ultimate illusion of master-level communication. It plants a seed in fertile ground and allows the listener to water it, believing all the while that they planted it themselves. To understand this, we must first dismantle the most pervasive myth about human speech, the belief that words carry meaning purely through their definitions. They do not. Words are simply containers. They are hollow vessels into which we pour tone, pacing, intent, and historical association. Two people can utter the exact same sentence, down to the syllable, and elicit entirely opposite outcomes. One will be dismissed as background noise. The other will cause a room to tilt on its axis. The difference is not the vocabulary. The difference is the invisible architecture standing behind the speaker. When human beings listen to another person speak, their minds are performing a continuous, lightning-fast calculation. They are not merely decoding semantic data. They are scanning for safety, scanning for status cues, scanning for emotional volatility, and scanning for incongruence. If your voice trembles slightly with the desperate need to be liked, the listening mind detects it instantly. If your pacing rushes forward out of a fear of silence, the listening mind senses a lack of grounded center. That detection triggers an ancient, reflexive resistance. People do not obey those they perceive as frantic, because frantic energy signals instability, and instability threatens survival. Conversely, when you encounter someone who speaks with a measured, deliberate cadence, something shifts in your nervous system. The frantic pacing slows down to match theirs. The defensive armor lowers slightly. Why? Because calm authority acts as an anchor in a chaotic environment. People naturally gravitate toward, and eventually comply with, the psychological center of gravity in any given room. If you hold that center, obedience is no longer a transaction you must force. It becomes a natural byproduct of your presence. Let us examine how this manifests in the ordinary friction of daily life. Have you ever noticed how the person who speaks the least in a high-stakes meeting often holds the most influence? They do not hoard airtime. They do not interrupt to prove their competence. When they finally speak, their words are weighted. They have allowed everyone else to spend their energy, reveal their emotional cards, and exhaust their rhetorical ammunition. By the time the quiet individual speaks, the psychological landscape has cleared. The room is quiet, waiting for an anchor. When that anchor drops, it holds. That this is not manipulation. Manipulation implies trickery, hidden agendas, and exploitation of vulnerabilities. What we are examining here is structural alignment. It is the art of matching your communication style to the evolutionary wiring of the human brain. The human brain is designed to seek leadership, to look for signals of competence, and to yield to those who demonstrate absolute emotional sovereignty. When you master this, you stop fighting human nature and start working with it. Think about the last time you found yourself completely captivated by someone's words. It was likely not because they used complex academic jargon. In fact, complex jargon often signals insecurity. a desperate attempt to mask simple ideas behind a wall of scholastic pretense. The people who command rooms use remarkably plain language. Their power lies in the absolute economy of their expression. They use half the words anyone else uses, but each word carries twice the weight. To build this capacity within yourself, you must first recognize your own leakage points. Every unnecessary filler word, every nervous laugh that punctures a declarative statement, every upward inflection at the end of a sentence that turns a statement into a subtle plea for validation, these are micro-leakages of power. They tell the listener, "I am not sure of my own footing. Please catch me." When you eliminate these leakages, not by suppressing them through sheer willpower, but by cultivating a deep, internal certainty, your baseline communication transforms. Consider the physics of a command. A true command does not sound like an order. It sounds like an observation of reality. If someone says, "You need to do this right now," it triggers psychological reactance, the innate human urge to push back against perceived control. But if someone speaks with a quiet certainty that frames an action as the natural, logical next step of a shared reality, the resistance dissolves. They are not telling you what to do, they are pointing out what is already happening. This requires a profound shift in how you view your own voice. Your voice is not merely a tool for conveying information, it is a tuning fork. It sets the frequency of the room. If your frequency is erratic, anxious, or defensive, the room will vibrate with resistance. If your frequency is anchored, calm, and immovable, the room will settle into alignment. As we move deeper into this exploration, we are going to strip away the superficial tricks of public speaking, the hollow hand gestures, the manufactured enthusiasm, the theatrical pauses taught in basic seminars, and look directly at the psychological machinery that governs human compliance. We are going to examine how pacing dictates authority, how emotional non-reactivity neutralizes opposition, and how the architecture of a single sentence can alter the trajectory of a relationship or a negotiation. You do not need to raise your voice to be heard. You do not need to force compliance to lead. You simply need to align your internal state with the universal mechanics of human attention. Take a slow, deliberate breath. Let the noise of your current expectations settle. We are about to look behind the curtain at how human beings actually process authority, respond to suggestion, and yield to command. To understand why some voices cut through noise while others dissolve into background static, we must examine the primary mechanism of human defense: psychological reactance. Every human being carries an invisible perimeter wall. When someone approaches that wall carrying a banner of overt control, aggressive persuasion, or desperate pleading, the alarm systems inside the listener's mind activate instantly. The drawbridge goes up, the gates lock. The listener stops processing the content of your message entirely and instead begins formulating a defense, an escape route, or a counter-argument. Most people fail in their communication because they crash directly into this perimeter wall. They hammer at it with force, urgency, and emotional volume, wondering why the other person grows increasingly stubborn, defensive, or dismissive. They treat communication as a collision sport. Master-level communication, by contrast, is an architectural bypass. It does not attack the wall, it renders the wall irrelevant. When you speak with calibrated, unshakable calm, you bypass the listener's defensive reflex because your delivery signals no threat to their autonomy. You are not demanding that they change, you are simply presenting a recalibrated view of reality. The human brain is naturally lazy when it comes to defending against non-threatening stimuli. If you present an idea without the toxic byproduct of pressure or desperation, the listener lowers their guard, and once the guard is down, the psychological architecture of command takes root effortlessly. Consider how this applies to the concept of certainty. Amateurs believe that sounding certain means speaking with rigid absolutes. They use words like always, never, and guaranteed, attempting to bludgeon reality into submission. But mature human psychology rejects absolute certainty because the real world is inherently probabilistic. When someone tells you that something will always happen, your internal bullshit detector triggers. You know life is too complex for absolute guarantees. Therefore, The moment a speaker uses rigid absolutes, they undermine their own credibility. True authority utilizes probability language framed with absolute composure. Instead of saying, "This will completely change your life," a calibrated speaker notes, "When you adjust this specific variable, the probability of a favorable outcome increases significantly." Notice the shift. The latter statement does not trigger skepticism. It reads as objective, sober, and grounded in reality. Ironically, by being less absolute in your vocabulary, you become infinitely more believable. And believability is the foundational currency of all real obedience. People do not obey loud claims. They yield to quiet, verifiable competence. Let us look closely at the mechanics of pacing. Pacing is the hidden metronome of human interaction. Most anxious individuals speak quickly because they unconsciously fear that the listener will interrupt them, lose interest, or reject them. Their speech accelerates, their breath becomes shallow, and their pitch drifts upward. This frantic cadence communicates vulnerability. It broadcasts to the listener's subconscious, "I am carrying more weight than I can handle. Please rescue me or dismiss me." When you deliberately slow your speech down, something remarkable happens in the room. You force the listener to adjust their internal clock to your rhythm. Physics dictates that smaller objects are pulled into the gravitational orbit of larger ones. In conversation, the person with the slower, more deliberate cadence holds the gravitational center. By refusing to rush, by allowing comfortable spaces of silence to exist between sentences, you communicate an absolute lack of internal scarcity. You act as though your time has value, your thoughts have weight, and your presence requires no external validation. Silence is often perceived by the untrained mind as a void that must be filled immediately. If a conversation dips into silence for 3 seconds, the amateur feels a spike of social anxiety and rushes to chatter away the quiet, thereby leaking power. The master of command, however, treats silence as a tool. Silence allows the last sentence you spoke to settle into the listener's nervous system like a stone sinking to the bottom of a clear pond. It gives their brain the necessary processing time to digest the gravity of what was said. When you master silence, you stop chasing agreement. You let the silence do the heavy lifting. Think about how this alters high-stakes negotiations or difficult conversations. When someone attacks you verbally or attempts to back you into a corner, their objective is to elicit an emotional reaction. An emotional reaction is proof that they have successfully hooked you, that they control your state. If you respond with immediate defensiveness, anger, or frantic explanation, you have handed them the steering wheel. You are no longer commanding the interaction. You are reacting to their stimuli. The hidden psychology of command requires absolute emotional non-reactivity. When an external pressure hits you, you introduce a deliberate micro-pause before responding. In that pause, you observe the stimulus without absorbing its emotional charge. You look at it clinically, almost as if you are a neutral third party watching a scientific experiment. Then, when you speak, your voice is devoid of retaliation or defensive posture. You address the substance of what was said while completely ignoring the emotional trap attached to it. This creates a profound psychological imbalance in the room. The person who initiated the friction expects you to push back with equal or greater force. When they encounter an immovable calm wall instead, their attack loses momentum. They find themselves shadowboxing against an opponent who refuses to swing. Without friction, their aggression collapses under its own weight. This is not passive aggressiveness. It is active sovereignty. It is the absolute refusal to allow external chaos to dictate your internal state. Let us examine how this translates into the phrasing of directives. When you need someone to take action, whether in a professional setting, a leadership role, or a personal dynamic, your phrasing determines whether they feel inspired or micromanaged. Weak command relies on positional authority. "You need to do this because I said so," or "It is your job, so just get it done." This breeds resentment and quiet resistance. Strong hidden command relies on natural consequence and alignment of identity. Instead of framing an action as an order, you frame it as the logical expression of who that person already claims to be, or as the natural solution to a shared objective. For instance, Framing a request around competence rather than compliance changes the entire neurological response. When you say, "Given your eye for detail, you are the ideal person to ensure this phase runs clean," you are not just asking for a task to be completed, you are installing a standard of identity. Human beings have an intense psychological need to act in alignment with the identity labels assigned to them by respected authorities. If you treat someone as capable, focused, and autonomous, they will unconsciously begin to alter their behavior to match that expectation. This is why true command never insults or belittles. Belittling creates enemies, and enemies are inefficient tools for achieving long-term objectives. Even when discipline or correction is required, the master speaker addresses the behavior while preserving the dignity of the individual. They separate the person from the error with surgical precision. By doing so, they elicit respect rather than fear. Fear makes people compliant only while you are watching. Respect makes people execute even when you are gone. As you practice this structural shift, you will notice that your relationships begin to change. People stop arguing with you not because you have crushed them into submission, but because arguing with someone who is entirely unshakable, deeply rational, and emotionally anchored feels exhausting and futile. They naturally fall into step beside you because your direction is clear and your energy is safe. Take another deliberate breath. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Notice the physical sensation of gravity holding you to your seat. You do not need to push against the world to make it move. You simply need to stand firmly in your center, speak with economy and weight, and let reality organize itself around your calm authority. To maintain this level of command under pressure, you must understand the subtle mechanics of emotional contagion. Human beings are biologically wired with mirror neurons, microscopic circuits in the brain that constantly scan the emotional baseline of everyone around them. If you walk into a room carrying an undercurrent of anxiety, urgency, or defensive tension, your nervous system broadcasts those frequencies to everyone in your vicinity. Within moments, the people around you begin to mirror that internal chaos, even if they cannot articulate why they suddenly feel uneasy. They mistake their own induced anxiety for a legitimate response to the situation. The reverse is equally true. When you anchor your internal state in absolute, unyielding calm, your nervous system acts as a stabilizing force for the entire room. People exposed to steady, grounded presence experience a biological drop in their own cortisol and adrenaline levels. Their breathing slows down, their cognitive clarity returns. Because you have provided the nervous system safety they unconsciously craved, they naturally lean toward your leadership. They obey your direction because following you feels like moving away from panic and toward safety. This is why commanding a room requires zero posturing. Posturing is the noisy language of the insecure. It involves raised voices, exaggerated hand gestures, dropping names, or manufactured displays of dominance. Posturing is transparent. Everyone in the room can smell the underlying fear of inadequacy. True command requires no display because it rests on a foundation of quiet, unshakable self-inventory. You know your boundaries, you know your capabilities, and therefore you have nothing to prove to anyone. When you speak from a place of having nothing to prove, your words carry the heavy, undeniable weight of truth. Let us examine how this applies to the structure of your vocabulary during critical moments. When you are attempting to guide a group or an individual toward a decision, avoid filler phrases that apologize for your own perspective. Amateurs constantly preface their ideas with defensive disclaimers like, "I might be wrong, but," or "just a thought, but maybe we could." These phrases are linguistic self-sabotage. They are preemptive white flags waved before any conflict has even begun. They tell the listener's subconscious mind to discount your input before it has even been fully processed. A calibrated speaker eliminates these weak prefaces entirely. You do not need to announce that your idea might be wrong. The intelligent listener already knows that every human perspective is inherently limited. Instead, you state your position as a clear observation of reality. If your perspective changes later based on new data, you update it with the same calm composure, treating adaptation not as a weakness, but as a mark of high-level intelligence, confidence, without rigidity, is the hallmark of master-level communication. Consider how tone modulation operates as an instrument of control. Most people believe that to emphasize a point, they must speak louder. In reality, lowering your volume is often infinitely more powerful than raising it. When a speaker drops their voice to a measured, quiet register, the entire room is forced to lean in. They have to quiet their own internal noise and focus intensely to catch every syllable. Whispering or speaking in a low, controlled register signals supreme confidence. It communicates, "I am not worried that you might miss this, because I know the value of what I am saying." The act of leaning in to listen creates a physical and psychological posture of compliance. Furthermore, pay close attention to the way you handle interruptions. An amateur responds to an interruption by either talking over the interrupter, turning the exchange into a shouting match, or by shrinking back and letting their thought die in the air. Both responses surrender your command. The calibrated response to an interruption is deceptively simple. You stop speaking entirely the microsecond the other person begins. You look at them with calm, unblinking attention, letting them finish their thought completely. This creates a fascinating psychological phenomenon. Because you did not fight them, their aggression finds no traction. Because you maintained steady eye contact without hostility, they begin to feel the uncomfortable weight of their own interruption. When they finish speaking, the silence that follows feels heavy, almost deafening to them. You then take a slow, deliberate breath and pick up your thought right where you left off, as if their interruption was nothing more than a brief, insignificant pause in your presentation. You retain absolute control of the narrative arc without ever raising your pulse. Let us explore how this dynamic manifests in written communication as well, because the hidden psychology of command is not limited to spoken words. Written communication, emails, messages, strategic proposals, often strips away tone and pacing, leaving only the structural skeleton of your thought. In writing, command is established through brevity, white space, and definitive syntax. Long, winding paragraphs filled with qualifiers and defensive justifications signal a panicked mind trying to cover all possible bases out of fear of criticism. A commanding written message is surgical. It respects the reader's time by removing every unnecessary word. It lays out the objective, the rationale, and the next step with crystal clarity. It does not argue, cajole, or plead for approval. It presents a clear path forward and leaves the reader with a simple choice: align with the path or offer a superior structural alternative. When you write with this level of economy, your words carry authority even when you are thousands of miles away. As you integrate these practices, you will notice a fundamental shift in how people respond to your presence. The friction that once characterized your interactions begins to dissolve, not because the world has become softer or easier, but because you have stopped pushing against the hinges. You are now working with the natural leverage points of human psychology. Take a moment right now to release any tension lingering in your jaw or your hands. Notice how grounding your awareness in your physical posture immediately quiets the internal noise. You do not need to force the next step. You simply need to maintain your center, trust the architecture of calm authority, and let reality organize itself around your steady presence. To deepen this mastery, we must examine how human beings process agreement and disagreement. Most individuals treat a difference of opinion as a personal threat. When someone challenges their perspective, their ego immediately constructs a fortress. They listen only to reload, waiting impatiently for the other person to stop talking so they can launch their counterattack. This reactive posture destroys influence. You cannot command a space if you are constantly defending your territory from every passing breeze. A master of communication operates from an entirely different psychological framework. When someone presents a contrasting view or challenges your position, you do not brace for impact. Instead, you lean into the data they are providing. You treat their disagreement not as an assault, but as a diagnostic tool. It reveals their priorities, their hidden fears, and the structural vulnerabilities in their current perspective. By remaining emotionally detached, you can analyze their argument with surgical precision while they are busy drowning in their own emotional reactions. Consider the strategic power of validating an opponent's logic before dismantling their conclusion. Amateurs believe that to win an argument, they must invalidate everything the other person says. This is a fatal tactical error. When you tell someone they are completely wrong, their ego locks the doors, and cognitive closure is achieved, meaning they stop processing any new information you offer. Conversely, when you find the grain of truth in their argument and validate it objectively, their defensive perimeter collapses. You might say, your assessment of the timeline is entirely accurate, and given those constraints, focusing on speed makes logical sense. You have just validated their premise. Their nervous system registers safety and agreement. Then, with absolute calm, you introduce the pivot. However, when we map that speed against our long-term stability metrics, the probability of structural failure increases significantly. Therefore, adjusting the sequence by 48 hours protects our core objective. Notice how there is no hostility, no ego, and no demand for submission. You have co-opted their own logic and redirected it toward your desired outcome. That is the essence of command without friction. Let us explore how this non-reactive posture transforms high-conflict environments. In any organization or relationship, chaos agents often emerge. Individuals who thrive on emotional turbulence, drama, and crisis. They unconsciously seek to drag everyone else down into their chaotic baseline frequency. If you meet their drama with frustration, lecturing, or frantic attempts to restore order, you have stepped onto their playing field, and on their playing field, they hold home court advantage because they have spent a lifetime perfecting chaos. The only way to neutralize a chaos agent is to starve them of the emotional fuel they require to survive. When a crisis erupts around you, and everyone else is accelerating their speech, raising their pitch, and projecting panic, you must deliberately drop your cadence by half. You become the eye of the storm. Your very stillness exposes their hysteria as unnecessary and inefficient. People naturally look toward the calmest person in the room during a crisis, because calmness is the biological signature of competence under fire. By refusing to match their panic, you inherit the leadership of the room by default. This brings us to a crucial realization about the nature of influence. True command is quiet because it requires no audience validation. People who are addicted to external applause are fundamentally weak. They will alter their stance, compromise their standards, and abandon their strategy the moment the crowd begins to murmur with disapproval. They are governed by the shifting winds of public opinion. A commanding presence is anchored internally. It is rooted in a deep alignment between your stated words, your underlying thoughts, and your long-term actions. When your internal architecture is unified in this manner, external criticism glances off you like rain off armor. You do not need to argue with detractors, because you know that time and execution will eventually reveal the structural integrity of your position. This quiet self-containment radiates a magnetism that draws people toward you, not out of fear, but out of a profound psychological hunger for stability. As you practice this integration, observe how your energy shifts throughout the day. Notice the temptation to over-explain yourself. An amateur speaks for 3 minutes when 30 seconds would suffice, driven by the insecure need to ensure that everyone understands every nuance of their brilliance. A master speaks the core truth, leaves space for the mind of the listener to bridge the gap, and then stops talking. Leaving things unsaid is a powerful demonstration of trust in the listener's intelligence and a bold assertion of your own restraint. Take a slow breath right now. Feel the ground beneath you. Release the invisible burden of needing to convince anyone of anything in this exact moment. Command is not something you chase, it is something you inhabit. To master the hidden psychology of command, one must understand how identity integration operates within the human mind. People do not act according to what they know, they act according to who they believe they are. If an individual views themselves as disorganized, hesitant, or incapable of handling pressure, no amount of external instruction or motivational cheering will alter their behavior for long. Their internal self-image acts as an invisible thermostat, pulling them back down to their baseline reality whenever they attempt to rise above it. When you attempt to command or lead someone by focusing solely on changing their actions, You are treating the symptom while ignoring the source. You are telling them what to do, without addressing the identity filter through which all actions must pass. Master-level influence works differently. It bypasses mere behavioral correction and speaks directly to the target's identity architecture. It installs standards of capability rather than lists of rules. Consider the difference between two distinct ways of managing performance. A weak leader focuses on compliance through surveillance, saying, "I need you to double-check every detail of this report, because mistakes are unacceptable here." This communicates distrust and reinforces an identity of inadequacy. The recipient feels micromanaged, leading to quiet resentment and, ironically, an increased probability of error due to anxiety. A commanding leader frames the exact same task through identity reinforcement. You have an extraordinary eye for structural integrity, which is why I need your final review on this document before it goes out. Notice the psychological transformation that occurs in the listener. You have not given an order. You have assigned a complementary identity trait, an eye for structural integrity. The human brain possesses an intense, innate drive toward cognitive consistency. Once an individual accepts that identity label, their behavior automatically adjusts to align with it. They will check the document with meticulous care, not because they are afraid of punishment, but because they are now protecting their newly established identity as a person of precision and competence. This principle extends far beyond professional settings into every facet of human interaction. When you are negotiating, resolving conflict, or guiding a collective effort, your primary objective should never be to force the other person to submit to your will. Forcing submission creates a debt that the other person will eventually seek to repay through passive resistance, sabotage, or departure. True command creates alignment, not submission. It makes the desired action feel like the most logical, self-respecting choice the other person can make for themselves. To achieve this, you must master the art of strategic framing. Framing is the lens through which an event, a problem, or a request is perceived. Whoever controls the frame controls the outcome of the interaction. For example, if someone brings a chaotic, emotionally charged problem to you and demands an immediate, frantic reaction, they are attempting to impose their frame upon you. They are handing you their storm and asking you to navigate it. If you accept their frame, you begin scrambling for emergency solutions, matching their frantic energy and losing your sovereign center. To break their frame, you must calmly step outside of it and reframe the context. Or you do not argue with their panic. You reframe the horizon. You might say, with absolute tranquility, "Let us look at what this looks like 30 days from now, once the immediate noise has settled." By shifting the temporal perspective from the frantic present to a calm, distant future, you shatter their emotional frame. The room instantly calms down because you have introduced a wider lens, a higher vantage point from which the crisis suddenly looks manageable, small, and transient. This requires immense internal discipline. It requires you to monitor your own nervous system for the first subtle signs of infection, the tightening of the chest, the shallow breathing, the urge to speak quickly to defend your position. The moment you catch yourself slipping into defensive reactivity, you must introduce a physical anchor. Drop your shoulders, lengthen your exhale, and slow your cadence down by a deliberate notch. Your physical composure will short-circuit your internal panic before it can bleed out into your voice or posture. Observe how master negotiators operate in high-stakes environments. They rarely raise their voices. In fact, the higher the stakes, the softer and more measured their delivery often becomes. They understand that a raised voice signals a loss of control, a subconscious admission that their arguments are no longer strong enough to stand on their own weight. When you speak quietly in a room filled with noise, you create a vacuum. People stop talking because they realize they are missing something important. They lean in toward the source of the quiet authority. As you integrate this understanding, you will notice that your relationships begin to require significantly less effort. You stop wasting finite psychological energy on arguments, power struggles, and endless justifications. You state your position with calm economy. You align your requests with the natural identity and self-respect of the listener, and you allow silence and time to do the rest of the heavy lifting. Take a slow breath right now. Notice the stillness that exists beneath the surface of your thoughts. You do not need to dominate anyone to hold a room. You simply need to stand firmly in your center, speak with calibrated weight, and let reality organize itself around your unshakable calm. To sustain this level of command over time, you must confront the most subtle trap that ensnares emerging leaders, the illusion of the performance mask. Many individuals who discover the principles of calm authority, strategic pacing, and emotional non-reactivity make the mistake of turning these tools into a rigid theatrical costume. They walk through life wearing an unyielding mask of stoicism, projecting an artificial, unblemished perfection. They believe that if they ever reveal a moment of uncertainty, fatigue, or emotion, their command will instantly disintegrate. This is a profound misunderstanding of human psychology. People are biologically attuned to detect incongruence. When someone presents themselves as an untouchable monolith who never wobbles, never doubts, and never feels friction, the human instinct for self-preservation flags them as untrustworthy. Perfection feels sterile, clinical, and inherently predatory. True command does not require you to pretend you are a machine. It requires you to be so secure in your foundational stability that your occasional human limitations do not threaten your authority. There is a vast, invisible chasm between neurotic vulnerability and sovereign transparency. Neurotic vulnerability is weaponized insecurity, dumping your unprocessed emotional chaos onto others and demanding that they manage your internal state. It is an evacuation of responsibility disguised as openness. Sovereign transparency, on the other hand, is the quiet, confident acknowledgement of reality without drama or self-pity. Consider how a master of command handles a mistake or an unforeseen setback. An insecure leader immediately panics, searches for someone else to blame, or constructs an elaborate defense to protect their fragile ego. Their voice tightens, their posture collapses, and they lose the room instantly because everyone can see that their ego is more important than the mission. A calibrated leader addresses an error with chilling, objective calm. They look directly at the reality of the failure without flinching, without making excuses, and without emotional theatrics. They state plainly, the initial trajectory contained a critical flaw in our assumptions. We are adjusting the variable immediately to correct it. Notice the absence of shame, defensiveness, or panic, because they treat the mistake not as a fatal blow to their identity, but as a neutral data point in a complex process. The people around them remain calm as well. By refusing to panic over failure, you demonstrate a level of psychological fortitude that commands deeper respect than perfection ever could. This brings us to the core anatomy of trust. People do not follow those who are always right. They follow those who are unfailingly steady when things go wrong. When an individual proves over time that their internal baseline does not shatter under pressure, they become an irreplaceable anchor point for teams, families, and organizations. The obedience they command is voluntary, deep-seated, and enduring because it is built upon the bedrock of proven reliability. Let us examine how this steady baseline transforms your relationship with time and urgency. Most people live in a state of chronic, low-grade emergency. They treat every minor email, every unexpected schedule change, and every interpersonal friction as a 5-alarm fire requiring an immediate, frantic response. This perpetual urgency is a symptom of internal scarcity, the unexamined belief that if you do not move at lightning speed, everything will collapse. When you operate from command, you recognize that true leverage lives in temporal sovereignty. You refuse to let external clocks dictate your internal rhythm. When an urgent request lands on your desk, you introduce a deliberate pause before acting. You evaluate the situation through a sober lens. Does this actually require immediate intervention, or is someone else's lack of preparation being masqueraded as an emergency for me to solve? In most cases, the frantic urgency is an illusion. By refusing to match the frantic pace, you force the situation to slow down and conform to your measured cadence. Think about how this alters the dynamics of persuasion in a negotiation or a difficult conversation. Amateurs rush to fill every pause in the dialogue, terrified that silence will be interpreted as weakness or a lack of answers. They talk themselves right out of favorable terms because they cannot tolerate the quiet space where real decisions are processed. The master of command treats conversational space like a canvas. They deliver their core argument with economy and precision, and then they stop talking entirely. They let the silence sit in the room like a heavy anchor. In that silence, the listener's mind is forced to wrestle with the weight of what was said. The more the listener squirms in the quiet, the more processing power their brain devotes to justifying your position to themselves. When you master the art of strategic silence, you realize that talking less is not a passive act. It is the ultimate exercise of offensive control. As you practice integrating these dimensions into your daily interactions, pay close attention to the subtle leakages in your own posture and language. Notice when you catch yourself offering unnecessary apologies for simply existing, taking up space, or stating a well-reasoned boundary. Catch those impulses in real time. Drop your shoulders away from your ears, take a slow breath through your nose, and let your voice settle back into its natural, grounded register. You do not need to fight for relevance. You do not need to demand submission through volume or force. You simply need to anchor your internal state in unshakable reality, speak with absolute structural clarity, and let the architecture of human psychology work quietly on your behalf. Take a slow, deliberate breath right now. Feel the weight of your presence, occupying the space around you calmly, naturally, and completely. To arrive at the final frontier of command, we must examine the ultimate test of psychological sovereignty, the ability to maintain absolute internal composure when interacting with individuals who possess institutional power, loud authority, or aggressive social dominance. Most people experience an automatic biological shrinking when they enter the presence of someone perceived as superior in status, wealth, or rank. Their posture caves slightly, their voice rises an octave, and their internal dialogue shifts from strategic calculation to defensive compliance. They become spectators in their own interactions, handing their sovereignty over before a single word is spoken. The hidden psychology of command recognizes that true status is not conferred by titles, corner offices, or inherited rank. Those are external costumes, easily worn and easily stripped away by changing circumstances. True status is an internal frequency. It is the undeniable energetic footprint of an individual who is completely at peace with their own boundaries, their own competence, and their own mortality. When you encounter someone who radiates this level of grounded sovereignty, external titles become entirely irrelevant. You no longer see the rank, you see the human being operating behind it. Consider how this alters high-stakes interactions with authority figures. An amateur attempting to impress a powerful person will posture, agree too quickly, laugh at unfunny jokes, and offer unprompted flattery out of a desperate, hidden need for validation. The powerful individuals are intimately familiar with this behavior. They encounter it dozens of times a day, and they view it with a mixture of boredom and quiet contempt. Flattery does not buy influence. It signals scarcity, and scarcity is the antithesis of command. A calibrated speaker approaches high-status environments with the exact same calm, unshakable baseline they bring to every other interaction. They do not grovel, nor do they posture with artificial aggression to prove their worth. They speak with measured economy, listen without defensive anticipation, and offer their perspective as an objective contribution to reality, rather than a petition for approval. When you maintain this level of sovereign calm in the presence of power, a profound shift occurs in the room. The power dynamic neutralizes. The authority figure, accustomed to everyone either shrinking in fear or posturing in compliance, suddenly encounters an immovable, respectful, and entirely non-reactive equal. Because you do not want anything from them in a desperate way, your presence feels safe, refreshing, and compelling. You cease to be another supplicant in their lobby. You become a peer in their mental landscape. Let us examine how this principle governs the art of setting and holding boundaries. Boundaries are not maintained through shouting matches, threats, or emotional outbursts. The moment you scream, threaten, or argue to enforce a boundary, you have signaled that your boundary is fragile and that your emotional state is dependent on the other person's compliance. A true boundary is like a structural wall in a building. It does not argue with the wind. It simply holds its place. If someone violates a clear boundary, the sovereign response is chillingly calm and mathematically predictable. You do not issue a dozen warnings or slide into emotional lectures. You state the consequence of the violation once, with absolute tranquility, and then you execute it without hesitation if the behavior repeats. For example, if someone repeatedly disrespects your time or terms, you do not launch into an angry speech about respect. You calmly observe, if this pattern continues, I will step back from this project. And when the pattern recurs, you step back without malice, without drama, and without looking back. That lack of emotional friction, combined with absolute follow-through, communicates a level of power that no amount of posturing can ever replicate. People learn very quickly how far they can push an immovable object, and they stop testing walls that never yield. As you integrate these mechanics into the core of your daily existence, you will notice that the friction of living begins to drop away. You stop wasting energy on trying to control things that are outside your jurisdiction. You stop wrestling with the egos of others, because you realize that attempting to dominate someone else's mind is a fool's errand. Instead, you focus entirely on mastering your own internal architecture, calibrating your speech to absolute economy, and aligning your presence with the fundamental laws of human psychology. Think about the path we have walked together through these sections. We began by stripping away the illusion of volume, recognizing that the human mind builds defensive walls against crude pressure. We explored how pacing, silence, and emotional non-reactivity act as gravitational anchors in any chaotic environment. We examined how identity reinforcement bypasses resistance by inviting people to live up to their highest capacities, and how sovereign transparency eliminates the fragile performance masks that betray insecurity. Now, standing at the summit of this architecture, you see the entire landscape clearly. Command is not a weapon you pick up to strike at the world. Command is the quiet, immovable state of a mind that has stopped fighting reality, mastered its own internal storms, and learned to speak the silent, universal language of human trust and competence. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders settle completely. Feel the solid ground holding you up. Let every word we have explored sink deep into your nervous system, becoming not just concepts you understand, but the natural rhythm of how you move through the world. We have walked together through the hidden architecture of human influence, systematically stripping away the noise, the posturing, and the desperate friction that characterizes ordinary communication. We have looked directly at the underlying machinery of the human nervous system, observing how mirror neurons, psychological reactants, and the innate biological search for safety govern every single interaction you will ever experience. You now understand with absolute clarity that true command has nothing to do with volume, aggression, or the crude manipulation of others. It has everything to do with the sovereign mastery of your own internal baseline, the absolute refusal to panic in the face of chaos, and the deliberate alignment of your daily presence with the timeless, unchangeable laws of human psychology. I think back once more to the quiet room we entered at the very beginning of this journey. Most people are still stumbling blindly through that space, shouting into the dark, pushing clumsily against the heavy hinges of human resistance, and wondering why the world stubbornly refuses to yield to their panic. They spend their finite energy trying to force compliance, completely unaware that crude force creates only equal and opposite resistance. They mistake performance for power and anxiety for urgency. They exhaust themselves chasing after the superficial approval of others, entirely unaware that the very act of chasing broadcasts the inner scarcity that repels the things they desire most. They are trapped in a perpetual cycle of emotional reactivity, letting every passing wind dictate their state of mind, their confidence, and their direction. You no longer operate from that place of scarcity or blindness. You see the mechanics clearly now, down to their foundational roots. You know that when someone attempts to drag you into their manufactured emotional chaos, your greatest weapon is not a counterattack or a defensive outburst, but a deliberate, chilling drop in your cadence. You know that silence is not an uncomfortable void to be feared and filled with anxious chatter, but a heavy anchor that allows your words to sink deep into the listener's consciousness. You know that true authority does not demand submission through threats or positional force. It installs standards of identity, inviting others to align with competence because doing so feels safe, logical, and deeply self-respecting. You understand that a genuine boundary is not a screaming match, but a structural wall that simply holds its place against the wind, without malice, drama, or unnecessary friction. Let these realizations settle deep into the very marrow of your bones. True transformation does not occur overnight, and true integration requires profound patience with yourself. There will inevitably be moments in the days and weeks ahead when old habits flare up, when the ancient survival reflexes of anxiety, defensiveness, and urgency attempt to reclaim the steering wheel of your mind. When those moments arrive, do not judge yourself with harshness or frustration. Judging yourself only introduces a secondary layer of panic, locking you back into the cycle you are working to escape. Instead, treat the slip as a neutral diagnostic tool. Observe it with clinical detachment, take a slow breath, adjust your physical posture, and return immediately to your sovereign center. Lasting change does not happen simply because you intellectually agree with a set of concepts. Real change happens when those concepts become your default biological response to the friction of daily life. The next time you walk into a high-stakes meeting, the next time an unexpected crisis erupts around you, and the next time someone attempts to push against your boundaries or test your resolve, pause. Let the frantic noise of the environment wash over you without penetrating your armor. Feel the physical reality of gravity holding you securely to the earth. Release the tension in your jaw, drop your shoulders away from your ears, and take a slow, deliberate breath through your nose. Let your voice settle back into its natural, grounded register. Do not rush to fill the silence. Do not scramble for defensive justifications or apologies for taking up space. Speak with absolute economy, knowing that each word carries the weight of a sober, unshakable reality. Allow the people around you to experience the stabilizing safety of your calm authority, giving them permission to calm their own nervous systems in your presence. When you consistently embody this level of calm power, the world stops looking like an exhausting obstacle course of difficult personalities, competing egos, and unpredictable threats. It transforms into a quiet, responsive space that naturally organizes itself around your steady center. You no longer need to fight for relevance, posture for status, or demand obedience. You simply need to stand firmly in your sovereignty, speak with precision, and let the quiet power of your presence do the work. The people you lead, the relationships you nurture, and the objectives you pursue will all fundamentally shift because you have stopped pushing against the hinges and started leveraging the structural laws of human nature. As you step away from this listening experience and back out into the moving, chaotic stream of your daily life, carry this architecture with you like an invisible compass. Let it guide your speech, temper your emotional reactions, and anchor your spirit when the winds begin to blow. Remember that your voice is a tuning fork, setting the frequency of the room around you. If your frequency is anchored, calm, and immovable, the room will settle into alignment. Consider how this mastery ripples outward into every domain of your existence. In your professional life, your career ceases to be a frantic scramble for recognition and becomes a steady ascent driven by trusted competence and unshakable composure. In your personal relationships, the exhausting cycles of misunderstanding, defensiveness, and emotional turbulence give way to deep mutual respect, clear boundaries, and authentic connection. You become a stabilizing pillar for those who look to you for guidance, not because you force them to yield, but because your presence offers them a harbor of absolute safety in an otherwise turbulent world. Reflect upon the depth of responsibility that accompanies this capability. True command is not a license for arrogance, nor is it an invitation to look down upon those who are still caught in the loops of emotional reactivity. True command requires humility, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to integrity. When you hold power without arrogance and strength without hostility, you become a rare and magnetic force in human society. People do not fear you, they respect you. They do not obey you out of coercion. They follow you out of a profound, internalized recognition of your stability and wisdom. Look closely at how your daily habits must now adapt to this new standard of being. Every time you catch yourself speaking out of anxiety rather than intention, pause. Every time you feel the urge to rescue someone from their own emotional turbulence by matching their panic, step back and let your stillness do the work. Every time a difficult situation presents itself, remind yourself that the person who holds the slower cadence and the calmer center holds the gravitational pull of the room. Practice this until it requires no conscious effort, until calm authority is simply who you are rather than something you are trying to perform. Observe the subtle ways in which your thoughts begin to quiet down when you stop feeding the internal fire of worry, speculation, and defensive planning. A vast reserve of mental clarity opens up. You begin to notice things you previously missed, the subtle micro-expressions of hesitation in a negotiator, the underlying insecurity beneath an aggressor's bluster, the genuine need for direction hiding behind a colleague's confusion. Because you are no longer consumed by your own internal panic, your mind becomes a mirror that reflects reality as it is, cleanly and objectively. This clarity is the ultimate foundation of strategic foresight. You see the chessboard clearly because your hands are not shaking. Consider the compounding effect of this presence over months and years. Small, consistent shifts in your cadence, your silence, and your emotional regulation accumulate into an entirely new personal identity. People who once dismissed you now listen intently when you speak. Situations that once triggered immediate anxiety now elicit a cool, calculated assessment. You become the architectural center of gravity wherever you go. This is not achieved through coercion or tricks. It is the natural reward of aligning your behavior with the deep, evolutionary truths of human nature. As you continue down this path, remember that mastery is not a destination you reach and permanently inhabit. It is a daily practice of returning to center. Every single day will present new friction, new distractions, and new invitations to slip back into old, reactive patterns. Treat each of those moments not as failures, but as opportunities to reaffirm your sovereignty. Each time you choose calm over panic, silence over chatter, and structural clarity over emotional volume, you forge your character anew. You strengthen the invisible architecture that holds your life together. Let us trace the entire arc of what we have uncovered together. We began by exposing the futility of volume and the defensive walls created by crude pressure. We dismantled the myths of absolute certainty and learned the power of probabilistic framing. We explored how pacing dictates gravity, how emotional non-reactivity neutralizes opposition, and how silence acts as an offensive tool of absolute control. We examined how identity reinforcement bypasses resistance by inviting people to live up to their highest capacities, and how sovereign transparency eliminates the fragile performance masks that betray insecurity. Finally, we looked at how maintaining an unshakable baseline in the presence of high-status figures neutralizes power dynamics and elevates you to a peer. Now, standing at this final threshold, you possess the complete blueprint. The tools are yours. The architecture is clear. The choice to inhabit this state of calm power belongs entirely to you. As the echoes of these words fade into the quiet spaces of your mind, let them seal themselves into your identity. You are no longer someone who reacts blindly to the pressures of the world. You are an architect of calm, a master of structure, and a sovereign presence in any room you choose to enter. Take one final, deep breath. Let the lessons of this architecture settle into absolute, unshakable stillness. Carry this calm power forward into every room you enter, every relationship you build, and every challenge you face. You are the architect of your own presence. Stand tall, speak with weight, and move through the world with unshakable command.